Good. So this is, there's a number of pieces in here. This is super enjoyable. I really love this, this work. And, you know, I've been talking about this in various ways for a long time, and like a number of these things, over time, there have been improvements. So we'll see towards the end, you know, a paper that came along a few years ago that it's like, oh, here's a new piece, right? So that's always been fun. I'm not saying anything that's concrete, but you will see that they keep getting to add to this, which is fun. So, okay, so we're going to think about how do you just, this is a different, so this should seem like a different thing, but maybe you can see some analogies, right? We're thinking about how to structure barriers so that we made this system robust. Now we're going to say, how do we allocate, you know, we're trying to do something good, which maybe is make money for us or help people in some way. How do we allocate facilities within a heterogeneous population so as to achieve some goal, right? So it could be hospitals, it could be coffee shops, whatever it is. Coffee shops are about happiness, right? So pubs, which is the solution in England and Australia, was just to put it everywhere. Right? That was really easy. Every corner, possibly 2 or 3 on a corner. Yeah. This is sociological theory, the third place. Has anyone heard of that? The third place, which is home, work, and then a third place. And the third place is where, well, it's the third place you go to most often, and it's a big deal for you socially. So it could be this, right? It could be a pub, or it could be, you know, the skateboarding rink, or it could be a sport place you go to. It could be a church, right? This is the third most important place for you. I'm thinking about where that is. I know I have it. Oh, I should have it somewhere. There's evidence from how people move around from cell phone data that, in fact, again, there's a Zipf's law for how frequently people spend at places, right? So it's usually home and work, and then a third, fourth, fifth. So it depends. Some people go to 10 places. Some people go to 15 places. But we have Morgan Frank, who is at the Media Lab, was one of our students here, did work that followed up using Twitter that showed the same kind of thing as what was seen with cell phone data. So the third place, and I guess I'm reaching out here a little bit, is what Starbucks wanted to call it. That they were in, if you go back to see what they talked about when they started, was they wanted to be the third place. Yeah. So they kind of are. I guess maybe it's Facebook. I had to review a class the other day, so I'm, you know, just at the back writing nice things. And I saw a student, and I didn't see the thing, but I could just see in a distance it was Facebook, and I'm like, really? That's pretty retro for you kids. Yeah. I'm really not sure, like how kids, like my kids, no way, you know, Snapchat and Instagram, and then that will be uncool at some point, I guess. But Facebook is not even considered to be a thing for grown-ups, though, right? It's like wrong. Twitter is for grown-ups. I've heard that a little bit. That's like, you know, you really got it together. I know. Twitter is varied. No one says Reddit is what you get to when you're older. I aspire to be on Reddit one day. Oh my God. Okay, so all right, very interesting problem. So how are we going to put these things down? So we have uneven, probably just you know, people are located for all sorts of reasons. You know, we've seen this Zipf law story for sizes of cities. It's hugely uneven, right? Hugely heterogeneous. You know, and that's partly geography. Cities get built where you know, there's central places, perhaps, or they're connected to the sea, whatever it is. And then, of course, people come in a get richer kind of sense, or we think they do, which builds them into being very uneven. So if density is uniform, then, of course, you're going to put these facilities down uniformly, right? So that's easy. No problem. You're going to have to, you will do that. You put if you've got a completely uniform, you know, the US is just covered with suburbs somehow, then you'll just have everything, and that's Orange County, actually, right? So there are some places, if you drive through them, they're translationally invariant, right? Every 10 blocks, it just looks like the same thing again. Another mall appears, and it has the same things in it. Then you drive a little further, and it's like, aha. and you feel like you got stuck in some loop. But I mean, of course, it's entirely reasonable. That's the way to do it. So, so which lattice is optimal for this sort of thing, right? Oh, that's a good question for you. Of course, it's the hexagonal lattice because it's awesome. So given it's uneven, what do we do? Yes. So we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to go through some work by Stefan first, and then Gassner and Newman. And then this is the piece that appeared. I guess, all right, it's 2009, but et al., this is much more recent. That first work by Stefan, this was published in Science in 1977. He's a sociologist, interesting character. I think he felt like no one liked him, which is a bit sad. But it was a great achievement. But going back, there are papers in the 50s and 40s. Geographers have worried about this. Computer scientists have worried about this. Mathematicians, like lots of people have thought about this in different ways, unaware often that other groups were talking about it, which is entirely reasonable pre-Snapchat, which has enabled science. Instagram would be good. Okay, so we got some tarot cards for this one. So this is the there are going to be these two limits. The most fair, right? So we want to help the world. We're being good, and we want to allocate. And this is supposed to be hospitals. That's what it's supposed to be. We want to allocate this so the average distance that a person has to travel, or the average time that it takes for them to get to their local hospital, is as small as possible. Right. So we're going to have some underlying, and you can think of it as a somewhat continuous density distribution. Of course, we'd block it, right? But density distribution for people across the US. And, I've talked about the unevenness. Of course, there's really, right, not a lot of humans in here. And then it's really, cities are really, really concentrated things. So how do you do that? Right. So we have some region. We have some underlying. So I'll use this notation. I know I've used it for different things. Rho is going to be the density here. It's often used for rate as well. Most likely uneven, right? So we've got some population thing. Now we're going to just put n facilities there, right? There, you can think of this as continuous, or really, there are a lot more people than there are facilities. Sort of, maybe that's not crucial, but let's think of it like that. So how are we going to locate it? And this is our goal to start with. We'll move to different kind of criteria later, but we're going to minimize the average distance between a residence and the nearest facility. And we'll frame, it'll become a framing of time. Okay, so let's look at, so we're okay? This is from Gassner and Newman. We'll come back to their work. So this is Mark Newman, who's a Michigan, prolific, unbelievable super champion. He's English, but that's okay. They had a number of papers in that year related to this optimal design of spatial distribution networks. And it's just sort of saying complex networks. As I sort of moved it into this one, there are other pieces in there where we talk about supply from one source to many sinks, or the other way around. So that's like a hut to supplying to your capillaries or capillaries, however we want to say it. Which way? Capillaries? Capillaries? I had a student who would wince visibly when I said my Australian version. Anyway, would just like really make him hurt. Damn. Okay. All right. So here's the game. We have some underlying. It's not shown, but there's an underlying distribution of population, and this is putting down 5,000 facilities, right? So it's a Monte Carlo thing. I think a simulated annealing kind of thing that's been done here. It is, and so this is a result of that, and it's based on where people lived in 2000. And so each one of these is a facility, right? So we're putting those down. And then these are the Voronoi cells, right? So Voronoi cell, we're not worried where the people are, but what we do is we say, oh, I never do this. I should do this. Yes. Oh, no. What a disaster. Can I do that? Come on. Yes. Oh, it's just too bad. It's terrible. Okay, that's not good. Anyway, I know I've said this, but Bagro went to some conference and he just got hold of this thing, and I guess no one else in the world knew about it. And And just in the middle of his talk, he's like, bonk like this, and the audience just went, such geeks. Anyway, all right, so it's just really funny. The fact you didn't do that means you're humans. Okay, so here's the idea, right? You find all of the region that is closest, the closest facility is this one, and then you draw a line around it. And the way that's going to work is, you find the nearest facilities around it. These two facilities, they're sharing, or they're splitting up the population here. And of course, to split that population, you simply draw a straight line that's in between them, right? Yeah. So we're going to draw those straight lines over and over again between all these two adjacent facilities, right? So there and there, that's a straight line that bisects them and is, if we draw a line between the two facilities, we want the perpendicular line that bisects that line. Okay, if that's the right words. And so you see all these little polygons. And so they're called Voronoi cells. If you haven't heard of those, Voronoi diagrams, very natural things to build. And so you can see, right, Los Angeles, San Francisco, all these cities kind of popping up because as the density of people gets higher and higher, you have to build in more and more hospitals. So these people have to travel further, right? So they are, it's not perfect, right? They are being hurt in a sense, right? So they have to travel further than these people do. Of course, there are less people going to these hospitals, so it's a bit of a change. We're not measuring that, we're just doing the average distance. But less people out here, so there's less of a, yeah, right. Okay, so here's sort of the big piece that I want to get out, and we're going to work towards understanding why this scaling exists and when it does and doesn't. So here's the idea. So now we can say we've got an underlying population density, and you could grid it in different ways. For example, just put a grid on it, make a nice refined grid, and count up how many people are in all of them. Or we could just take these Voronoi cells. And so one thing we can do here is say, what's the density of this facility? Well, there's this area here, so we'll just say 1 divided by the area. That's the density for facilities in that region. Just a rough thing to do, right? So the facility density is much higher there, but it's connected to a local population density, which will be the number of people here divided by that area as well. So you can do that sort of thing. Play around with it a little bit. That's not right. You want a grid. All right, so you do a grid. Okay. All right, so we do this. So we're going to have a local population density, and here this is just from the simulation. It's going across 2, 3, 4, 5 orders of magnitude. So excellent scaling. And this is the facility density, right? And this is, again, for this constraint where we want the average distance that a person is from a facility to be as small as possible. There's some speckling, right? It's not perfect scaling. But the trend is strong, and the exponent that's measured, right, this is not put on, is 0.66. Okay, so what do you think if it's 0.66? What do you dangerously surmise is the possible exponent here?
3/4.
Wow, that really hurts. Not for what, but for the reason, because 3/4 is an exponent that I've had a huge battle with over. Are you doing that to me? Because it's a whole world of work that there's a battle between 3/4 and what this is closer to, 2/3. Yeah, right. Wow. A 1/12, difference of a 1/12, and there are books and TED Talks and people arguing and careers built on that difference, which will matter, I suppose, if you scale up medicine from a mouse to a human. But otherwise, it's kind of ridiculous. Yeah, 3/4, nice. So 2/3, and if it's 2/3, what do we think about 2/3? The 2 and the 3. Is it to do with something to do with doctors, hospitals? Or this isn't true for coffee for Starbucks. Starbucks doesn't have this scaling. So ones that want to make money, they just care about who, right? You're not going to put your Starbucks out in the middle of nowhere. They tend to have a scaling that's more like 1, which we'll get to. But for a long time, people thought the theory and the sort of observations was just sort of 2/3 was this universal thing, and that's kind of how everything should be done. And any deviation from that has some sort of weirdness or whatever. But actually, there's a good story for why it could be 1. So we've got a 2 and we've got a 3. Where could the 2 come from? You want to think very raw ways, right? Where it's true there are mountains and so on, right? There are some ups and downs here, but this is a pretty big flat thing. Like if you got down on the side of the US and looked at it like this, it's not that. So it's to do with area a little bit, yes. This lives in which space, kind of, almost? 2 dimensions. So that's the thing. So you might think, so when you see 2/3, dimensional argument might be sitting there. And it could be that it's d equals 2 over d plus 1. So it's 2 over 2 plus 1, 2/3. It could be 3 dimensions, and it could be d over d minus, I've said the wrong thing. It could be d minus 1 over d, right? So it could, you could have some argument that says we're sort of in 3 dimensions, and there's somehow exponent is derived from that dimensionality, and it's like 3 minus 1 divided by 3. Or it could be that the 2-ness, the 2-dimensionality of this underlying thing. And it really is very 2-dimensional. Yes, there are some ups and downs, but it's kind of a flat thing. We do live in this very thin kind of part of the atmosphere. I mean, we really can't jump basically very high as well, right? We're not good with heights. So, okay, so okay, yes. So pretty good scaling. The fit's not bad, and so that becomes the game, right? So this is the big claim. So why is this? And this is stuff you haven't seen, but it's kind of here. So branching networks, which is you think of river networks or blood networks, one source, one sink. Now we have sources and sinks distributed throughout. This little picture here, and I guess we're running out, so I'll just talk about this little picture here, which we'll get to later, is, okay, now we're going to do something on top, which is you've got all your hospitals or all your Starbucks. How do you, or say post offices, how do you get them to, what's the network you put on top of that to most efficiently send stuff around? Right? So you go from, everyone could have a plane or a little special hovercraft thing in the back of their, in their backyard, and they could fly to any point they wanted, right? That's one way to do it. Or you could start to have hub structures, which, of course, airline networks do. But there's a balance. And for some reason, Cincinnati is the most important place in the world. Okay, so that's good. And so we're going to talk about this, and we'll talk about Newman stuff. And this is just really, there's a balance of optimality, where we're going to say we want to minimize something. So we'll do this sort of calculus business again with that, versus other kinds of approaches. But largely, there's an optimality argument underlying why these structures are the way they are. And of course, that has to be arrived at over a long process. People filling up, say, the US in terms of where they live takes a long time. It changes over time. Places like Starbucks and hospitals and whatever, they are always adapting, it's slow for hospitals, but you can get out of whack, right? You can get out of balance. So I guess some of you are from Burlington originally. The history. I mean, this place had maybe 15 elementary schools, I think, something like at least 10 elementary schools. So UVM has just taken over one of the old ones down here just down on Pine Street. That's become, Colchester Drive, Pine Street has become a part of the new arts center. But there are maybe what are we down to? 5 elementary schools, I think, maybe. But yeah, there used to be a lot more kids. And the baby boomers who are not doing anything bad to the country now. So, you change and adapt, right? So you have to change and adapt. But they can be slow with buildings and structures like that. Starbucks is happy to make something, whoop, and then it can disappear. Banks, drugstores, they have essentially wars, right? Like New York City, Broadway just got filled up with drugstores at some point. I'm like, what is going on? And banks, Rite Aids and whatever, just everywhere. And then, a few years later, a few of them are still there. They know what they're doing. but they overpacked a little bit, and the strong will survive the scaling will. Okay, I know it's time to go. I will talk for hours and hours and hours, so you should just run away. All right. Thank you, people.